I was going to hold back a little bit. Fuck it. We're dealing with cops, and I know they're not going to. And before they smoke me, I'm going to let it all hang out. So here you go. Here's you guys want a little proof of how the sheriff's department committed an arson to try to take me out like the umpteenth time? Go on down to Rancho Jurupa Campground in Jurupa Valley and talk to Jack. He's the head park ranger there. Now, park ranger's probably a pretty dependable witness. He's the head ranger there. This guy, you can tell 5 seconds after you meet him that he's about as straight as a grizzly's dick. This guy don't fuck around. He's an honest dude. He's a fucking park ranger. He works for peanuts because he's just good people. He'll tell you himself what happened November 1st, 2019. I'm not going to tell you the reason why because I don't have time and I don't want to bore people out of the video, but go down there and talk to him and ask him what happened during that fire that burned down 3 houses and 2 businesses because the sheriff's department had chased a car off the side of the road about 2:24 a.m. They sat there and watched a fire after the car that they chased off the side of the road burned out. Now, it was a field that had been turned over 3 times by a tractor. And however, you go online and there's no videos from it anymore. It's the only fire since 2005 when YouTube came out that's not covered by YouTube, covering, showing the news broadcasts of footage. They're in a news agency in town that will show you their original footage because the one footage of still frame they took from one of those footages, they colored everything around this car black to make it look as if it pulled into a field full of brush. And that's why the whole neighborhood went up in flames when that ain't what happened at all. The field had been turned over by a tractor 3 times. It's the fire code, and it's right next to the county's fucking building for recreation. Of course, they adhere to the fire laws. There's hundreds of people camping there every weekend. And so that's insane to think that they don't mow down the weeds there because everybody has to. It's a severe fine when you don't. You got to have 70 foot from the road cleared. These guys take it one step farther, and they clear for 1,200 feet. So this car is chased off the road into the thin little light layer of grass, the 18 inches before the chain link fence that can't get taken down. And somehow it lights it on fire, which is not uncommon. The sheriffs who are trained just like firefighters are that you're not going to put out a car fire that's fully engulfed with a kitchen-sized fire extinguisher. They run out there anyway, despite their training and what they're told not to do, and extinguish it with those things in a feeble attempt to stop the car fire, which is fucking retarded. They've never done it before, and they probably haven't done it since, but they had to have an excuse why they stood back and watched the fire continue to burn after that. Now, it's a Santa Ana windstorm on November 1st. And that actually wasn't November 1st. It was October 31st. But they want to say it was November 1st. That's fine, because that gives them an excuse as to why it wasn't answered so quickly. Cal Fire is covering their asses, too. However, none of the witnesses, the 19 witnesses that saw what happened that day, will concur with any of these details. It's been altered. Most of the footage has been, all the videos have been removed from YouTube. There's a still frame left and a side story from a person that used to work for the LA Times. Pretty much the only thing you can find on there besides local news broadcasts with no video. They're covering their asses like crazy. So they take a brown field in the still frame and they CGI it and whatever you call it, PDF edit it to make it look as if it had burned down a bunch of brush around where it had been sitting. There was no brush. The truth of the matter is, if you talk to Jack, the park ranger, he told me the following morning when I went out there to try to see why I was almost killed in a brush fire and suffered burns from it. I wanted to know why, of course. When I'm walking through the campground, the ranger flags me down. Now, I don't know the ranger that well. I've spoken with him a couple times because I camp out. I'm homeless, and I camp out near his camp. So there's been a few times when things came up missing, and they came out and got to know me because they were making sure I'm not stealing stuff from the campground. So they know I'm not a crook. They know I'm not a bad guy. So when he sees me walking through the campground that day, he flagged me down to tell me that he was surprised I was still alive. He couldn't believe I was still alive, actually. He was real happy to see me, give me a squeeze on the shoulder, shook my hand, and had a real big smile on his face. And I asked him what happened. He said, well, the sheriff's chased his stolen car off the road, and when I seen the thing go up in flames, I walked to the front gate. Now, where he stands at the front gate, he's hidden by the floodlights that illuminate the sign at the front gate. He wasn't hiding from the cops, but there was no other place he could stand. He just happened to be in the one spot where the cops couldn't see him. It's pretty simple. They thought that they were out there alone that day. They stood there, 3 deputies stood there, and bantered while a fire the size of a baseball that remained after that car fire burned itself out, the size of a baseball, slowly danced across this 1,200 feet of field until it hit the wildland that wasn't mowed down and turned over because it's a creek bed. That took 25 minutes. The fire department was not dispatched. Now, those cops thought that they were alone out there, and they stood there and watched a fire, again, the size of a baseball. He told me it never got bigger than a cantaloupe, and that was only occasionally. What had happened is there's so little brush after you turn a field's dirt over 3 times that the fire started about 100 yards behind the car fire, and then it was just a small little fire, and then the wind would blow it out. It's 85-mile-an-hour wind. the wind would blow the fire out, but there's still embers left. And eventually those embers find another little clump of grass, 100 yards, 20 yards, whatever. Okay, just jumping a little bit further, and that ember and the 85-mile-an-hour wind, after a few minutes, will start that little piece of brush on fire, and the process repeats until eventually 1,200 feet of field is crossed in a half an hour. He told me, Slim, I could have ran out there with 1 foot and stomped that fire out in 10 seconds flat, and they didn't do nothing. They just stood there. I couldn't understand what happened, he told me. And I mentioned that they were trying to kill me one more time. He just looked at me like I was crazy, and I didn't want to get into it with him. I just let him. I asked him some more details about it, and he just couldn't get over the fact he was real concerned with the fact that the cops that he thought were good guys just stood there and did nothing about it. So I asked him, I go, well, you knew I was back there, and it was heading for me, and you had an hour warning. Why didn't you come back there and tell me something? Now, he just told me he didn't want to get involved in a scenario because it wasn't his scene. And I reminded him, it's your campground. What are you talking about? You're responsible for those people's safety. But I now know what the truth of the matter was. He never said this, but now that I know the scenario, I would have stayed hidden too. Because if you go out and expose yourself, and 3 dirty cops that just committed an arson potentially is going to take lives know that you witnessed it, you're not in a good position because the cops are thugs. This ain't 1965. This is modern times, and you can't trust any of these motherfuckers. And he's a park ranger, and he knows that. There ain't nobody in this community that don't know you can't trust the sheriff. They're the only people that we fear. They're the only people we're concerned with. They're the only crooks around anymore. And they answer to nobody. So those were his exact words. I could have stomped that. I could have run out there with 1 foot and stomped that fire out in 10 seconds flat, Slim. And they didn't do nothing. That's your sheriff's department for you. Now, when I called the arson investigator for Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and it was 3.5 weeks before I got a return phone call. This is a hotline. I hate to tell you, CDF. Hotline implies that you're going to answer the fucking phone. Not that I could leave a message and someday somebody might call me back. And when they do call me back, the guy mumbles so quiet I couldn't understand what the fuck he was saying. He didn't leave his name, and I had no number to find him to return the phone call at. So what's the point of all this? I could tell right off the bat the firefighter's covering for this guy, but then firefighters think cops are wonderful people because they see them at the scene of traffic accidents and crime scenes. And at those times, cops are always on their best behavior. They're not stupid. Well, they are, but they're not that stupid. They're going to be on their best behavior while people are rolling by rubbernecking. You're not going to put somebody's Rolex in your pocket or beat somebody up on camera and in front of all these witnesses. They do have a criteria to meet, and it's convincing everybody that they're still good guys. So they don't get too extreme with it. However, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30 in the morning, and there was nobody around, and it's the middle of nowhere. However, the ranger was maybe 100 yards from these guys in an open field with a straight line of sight and nothing obstructing his view. And it's pitch black out there. There's like 2 street lights. They happen to be standing under one, and he happened to be standing under the other. It was pretty damn obvious he knows what's going on. Now, he reminded me also that he has a radio on his hip, and he didn't say so, but I'm pretty sure that it's, I've heard somewhere along the lines that it's the policy for the rangers and the park personnel, anybody on duty when there's a high wind alert in Southern California, we all know how fucking dangerous that is. They have to have the radios tuned into the fire dispatch because a fire could whip up and kill people in a few minutes flat. However, the cops stood by and watched this thing for what I estimate to be 45 to 50 minutes before they dispatched the fire department. By that time, a widow's house, Mrs. Butchko, her husband is the veterinarian for like this whole area. He had passed away, and that's his widow, Miss Butchko, burned her house down. And then when it hit my friend Juan's house, which is 2/3 of the way to where I was camping at, which was their goal, then they finally called the fire department. When my friend Juan had tried to move the hay bales away from the north side of his house because they had caught fire and he knew his house was doomed. So he picked up these hay bales, and they used to be wrapped in wire back in the day, but these days they use plastic ties. And when the plastic ties got burned through as he's carrying it away from his house with a tractor, you got a burning hay bale, not alfalfa, but hay. And it sent a goddamn gazillion embers into the meadow I'm sleeping in. Because remember, I'm homeless because cops are dirtbags. They forced me out here. So I wake up in a world of fire and barely survive. It's only through the grace of God I got out of there because none of it made no sense. Well, I shouldn't have made it through there. And that's why the ranger couldn't believe I was even still kicking anymore. So I asked him, I says, hey man, will you, why didn't you make a statement to the FBI for me? You know, he says, I'll make an anonymous statement, but only if they come out here and talk to me in person. I'm not going to talk on the phone to anybody, Slim, because I don't know if I'm talking to the sheriff or not. And we can't trust him. You know that. Everybody knows that. So I tell this investigator, the arson investigator, I say, dude, you need to go out there and talk to him in person. You cannot make a phone call. I repeated it several times to him. It took me a month to find this guy because, like I said, he didn't leave his number. Officer May, you're corrupt as they are. And you stand so close to the forest, you can't see the woods, or however that saying goes. You got to remember that when you're at the scene of a traffic accident, they're on their best behavior. You've been duped. Just like every gangster that was busted in the 70s and 80s, the Italian mafia that were taking over our country back in the day. Remember when they were pulling all these Sonny Barger and Luciano and all these people, the FBI, when they finally busted the main guy and they're pulling him out of his house, the neighbors are out there in tears because they are positive that they got the wrong guy, because Mr. Machine Gun Kelly's a great person. And Luciano, what are you talking about? He wouldn't hurt a fly. And, Sonny Barger, fucking, you, what, he's a bad guy? What do you mean? That's where you firefighters are at. You're too close to this thing to see it. You're not looking at it properly. You work every day with dirt bags and you have no idea, because you don't see them at any other time other than when everybody's driving by with their neck pointed at your direction because they're dying to see what happened, because people are rubberneckers. Of course, the cops could be on his best behavior at that moment. But you tell me why the ranger says that fire was not dispatched for 50 minutes. What possible motive could that guy have? I don't know him. I barely knew his name because I met him once before because he tried to evict me out of the river bottom where I was camping before they realized I wasn't stealing shit from everybody down there. But, like I said, he said he would make an anonymous statement, and to this day, nobody's ever been over there to talk to him. Now, he's not the only witness there. The other witnesses were downfield a little, about where the fire hit the wildland and exploded into a 12-foot or 100-foot wall of flames 25 minutes later. And they all told me the same thing. Same exact story. They went up as high as the estimate of 30 minutes before it hit the wildland, but all of them said it was about 45 to 50 minutes before the fire department was dispatched. Because here's the thing, you got 3 or 4 park personnel. Even though they're an eighth of a mile apart, the radios are going full throttle because it's fan and wind. It's the only way you can hear it. It's policy that they have it on, I'm pretty sure. At least I know they all did. Whether it's policy or not, don't matter. They all had them on that day. I know that for a fact. So let's say you're standing on the pitcher's mound in a stadium, and it's a 7th inning stretch. Crowd's kind of making a little bit of noise. If there's only one person to your direct left and you're standing on the pitcher's mound and he's got a talk radio going, KFI, you're not going to hear it amongst all the other talk going on. But if there's a guy to your right and your left, and they both have the same radio station going, then your ears can distinguish that from all the other chatter in the background very easily. And we all know this. So all the campers that witnessed this, even though they didn't have a radio in their pocket on the person that they were controlling, they could hear what's going on because it echoes through the entire campground from both directions of their ears. So they all know what happened. Everybody knows that fire department was not dispatched. So you would think that when you call the fire department up, the guys who took an oath to protect people and property from fire, that they would do something about it. I never had a reason to hate a firefighter. They're heroes, man. They are. They really are heroes. But now they're going a little too far covering for these motherfuckers. The government has put everybody from people who raise guard dogs to sewer workers to the police department, the fire department, all in this category of first responders, scaring us to death about terrorist events. They're trying to make us feel like we're dependent on them. We're not. Guys, it ain't that dangerous. You're 2.4 times more likely to die driving a forklift than you are being a cop. That's a fact. Go into the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look at some truth. And then start watching YouTube. If you're a baby boomer, wake the fuck up. This ain't the Andy Griffith Show. Those guys were gone a long time ago. And go out there and wonder and ask your communities, jury services, why you ain't got a jury duty notice in years. Because it ain't right. It's the only thing that separates us from third world countries. And now we don't even have that freedom anymore. So, Riverside County Fire Department, I would say fuck you too. But right now I only have a fucking deep hate in my heart for Officer May because he's helping this shit get down the road for the corruption that's been inundating our communities. They said for years that they weren't raping kids on an island in the Bahamas for years. They told Joe Rogan he was crazy. He'd done too many Fear Factor episodes, that he didn't know what he was talking about, that he was listening to people that didn't matter. And what do we say now? Bill Clinton, you think Bill Clinton's a good guy now? I think he's a second most likely person to show up at that child rape island. All of our politicians are involved in it because, like it says in the Bible, they're going to come after our children first in the end times. And here we are. So you know what? Let's try to pump the brakes a little for the kids, at least. For the widow that lost her home, for my migrant friend from Mexico who worked his ass off in the United States. Well, when the prejudice was still pretty severe when he got here. He's in his 60s. I see this guy, and he looks like he's about to commit suicide when I see him. He's depressed like hell. He rides his horseback through the river bottom where I camp out. He's always looked out for me. His dogs catch a pig. He always makes sure I get it. He's always looked out for me. He comes by and makes sure I get what I need because he knows my scenario too. And I just hate it that they were here to get me and it affected him. This ain't his fight. And I was hoping to be able to get his house back for him because I can't even get anybody to look into this at all. The sheriff's department burned our neighborhood down and nobody fucking cares. So, you sheriff's departments who took my food stamps this month, hey, I know what you're thinking. All you TikTokers and YouTubers out there that are tuning into my videos here, well, the latest is, you guys all know, I would go to work in a heartbeat if they'd let me. They shoot my bosses. They steal my paychecks. If you see my other videos, you're already hip to this. I'll give all the details anybody wants if you want to privately investigate this stuff, because if you think I'm bullshitting you, I want you to go check into this because I don't tell lies. They do. So, wake up, America. When you get rid of these people who have this boys in blue, if you're watching Blue Bloods and Chicago PD and all that, stop. Because cops' lives ain't that dangerous. They don't get in shootouts. It's exceedingly rare for a cop to be involved in a shootout. And, they don't live like that. You're more likely to die driving a forklift, catching a dog for a living. These are both more dangerous trades. It ain't that dangerous. So you cops, shut the fuck up about how dangerous your job is. You never tell the truth. Every time you open your mouth, nothing but lies come pouring out, I have relatives who are cops, and I came up to one of them one day, and I said, hey, man, I said something crazy. I forget. I think I said something about, I heard that you go to the zoo and rape baby orangutans every Thursday just to get her eyes out of them. And this is a relative. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Some of you on drugs? I says, well, that's what I heard. He goes, well, who told you that? And I told him then another cop told me that. And his first response to me was, oh, come on, everybody knows cops are full of shit. Yep, you're right. We all know it. So, you know what? There you go. You guys who investigate and stuff, go on out there and go to Rancho Carupa Campground. Ask to talk to the head ranger, Jack. He'll tell you. He told me he'd tell anybody what happened. But nobody's ever been out there to talk to him. Jack, thank you, brother, for standing up for the right thing. Because I knew you were a righteous guy. I could tell, even the few minutes I did talk to you before all this, I could just tell you're good people. There ain't nobody who's a park ranger who's not a good person, I don't think. That kind of person just wouldn't take that job. So thank you again, man. And you guys keep tuning in, and I'll keep you abreast to all the latest corruption information, at least all of it that I can come up with, because I know they're going to smoke me for this. I know they're after me right now. I mean, fuck, they're taking my food out of my mouth now. I already can't work. And all they ever did was stop to save somebody's life. I stood between the police department and their fame, and I should have done it. I'm not going to say I shouldn't have done it, because I ain't going to get punked by no fucking punk-ass cop. And I'm still here, and they keep trying to kill me. So thanks for tuning in, and there'll be another update here shortly, if I'm still alive. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning in.